In the previous video, I mentioned moving on to pockets, but there's actually one more thing that I want to go over with this particular part, with this contour, this first contour, and that's to go ahead and post-process the G-code from Mastercam. So when we create a part and create the toolpaths in Mastercam, what we ultimately want to do is to be able to post-process and generate the G-code that we can then take over to our CNC mill and actually mill the part out. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're using our CAD-CAM package to do the post-processing of the G-code rather than writing a manual G-code program. So we'll discuss more about G-code and the different G-codes that are available to you and what they do in upcoming classes. But right now, what I want to focus on is actually performing this task in Mastercam. So one thing that I noticed is that whenever I generated the G-code to kind of step through this before making the video, I noticed that when I went to save the NC file, it was not going to the file path that I thought it was going to go to. And I think the reason for that is I think I figured out why. So I wanted to share that with you because in a previous video, going to File and then Configuration, what we did was in System Configuration dialog box, we went to Files. In this previous video, I had shown you how to change the file path, the file path, the default file path, the different types of files go to, and we actually changed the Mastercam parts. So in our case, the .emcam files, and we also changed the mill NC programs. But what we didn't do is we did not do the mill toolpaths or the NCI files. And I think what was happening was because those are in some way coupled together, and the NCI files are actually the intermediate NC files that Mastercam uses in the simulation. Because those are somehow coupled together, I was not getting the file path, the default file path that I wanted. Instead, it was just sending it to my Mastercam file. So what I would suggest doing is go ahead and change that file path as well. So I'm going to select OK to this, and I'm going to go ahead and one of the things that you need to make sure of, in this case, we only have, once again, as I said in a previous video, we only have one toolpath. When you have multiple toolpaths, you need to make sure that before you post-process or before you run the simulation, that there actually is, that you actually have all of the toolpaths selected. And you can tell if it's selected because there's this little green check mark on this folder right beside the toolpath name. The way to select all toolpaths would be or all operations is actually this little arrow with the little green triangle over here. So if you select it, it will select all of the toolpaths. Once again, we only have one in this case, so it's not that big of a deal. So the way to actually generate the G-code or to post-process the G-code is to go ahead and use this little G1 toolbar right here, this little G1 icon. So I'm going to left click to select it, and it brings up this post-processing dialog box. And inside of here, one thing that I always recommend doing is making sure that it's grayed out here, but make sure that whichever active post-process or whichever machine definition you want to use, make sure that's the active post. So in this case, I know that I want to use this generic Haas 3X mill. That's what I started with when I set up my machine group over here. So I know that I'm okay. If you see anything else here than what you actually want to use, then you need to go back and change that. And you can actually change that in this files area, but I'm not going to do that right now or show you how to do that right now. I can do that at another time. The other things that I always do here in this post-processing dialog box is to show the output part file descriptor. So I enable this, and I also make sure that I enable the NC file, because that's really what I need. So I need the actual NC file, which is going to be a text file that's going to have all that G-code in. And then I always enable, if it's not already enabled, enable this ask, which is, for overriding permission. And I also make sure that this is enabled and that this is a .nc extension. I believe that all of those things are essentially defaults, but just in case they are not, I just want to make sure that you guys are doing that. We're not going to send a machine because in the class that I teach, our machine in the lab is not networked. The CNC machine is not networked, so we can't just send it directly to the machine. What we're going to do is save the file to a USB and bring that file over to the machine on the USB and load it onto the controller that way. We do not need to output an NCI file, so I'm not going to output this intermediate file here. The last thing that I'm going to do here in this post-processing dialog box is go to this properties, and what I like to do here is to just put in a description of the part, and a lot of times what I do with students is tell them, go ahead and put your name or something like that in there, so that when we have multiple programs that we are loading onto the machine and students are at the machine, they can see that is the NC file that they are to use for their own part. So what happens here is, as part of this descriptor actually gets output to the NC file whenever as a comment in the NC file, and you'll see that once we go ahead and complete this process. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK here. And I'm going to go ahead and click OK here. And then what happens is I'm launched to actually save this somewhere. Okay, so we can save it in our default file path that we set up. Or if you guys are doing this in class and you're actually post-processing it right before you're getting ready to go to the milling machine, you can just go ahead and put that right on the USB that you can sign out of the lab office. So I'm going to hit the save button. And you can see then what happens is there's a Mastercam code expert that then opens up. So it is a for lack of a better term here, a powerful text editor, I guess is what you could say. There's a lot of different things that you can do with the G code in here that you can't do with a simple text editor like a notepad or something like that. So at any rate, I'm not going to go through this too in depth right now, but we can see that in our program here, it's a very short program because it's a very simple part. In our program are all the different the things that are in green and in parentheses are all comments, and you can see like some of the comments that we added in, like this first contour example and the cut slot through the part for our toolpath. Those were things that we added in, and they do show up here in the actual NC file. So with that, anyway, what I just wanted to show you again in this video was the basic setup for this, the basic steps to go ahead and post-process this, and we'll discuss G codes and post-processing in more depth in later class time and maybe even some later videos.